How do you know what phase of training to start someone inside of? You've learned all the things with NASM, the OPT model, even the assessments, and I've gotten a lot of questions actually from you guys here on the YouTube channel, so don't forget as we go through, leave some comments because we read them, but on what to actually do, where to start somebody in regards to their initial training program. So what I'm gonna try to do before I give you guys some ideas is I'm gonna show you a couple of ways that I look at it, really try to give you guys my thought process and really simplify it for you so you know exactly where to start someone. And while we go through this, just keep in mind, guys, this is also why they call programming a science and an art, because there's not gonna be one example. And you might talk to 3 or 4 different coaches at my level of training. We might all start people at slightly different places, so there's gonna be a little bit of you using your common sense, reading the person that you got in front of you. But the first thing I wanna do is I wanna make sure you guys know, as we learn the OPT model, sometimes students get confused on the fact that someone is stuck entirely in just one phase at one given time. I've mentioned this in a few other videos, but if you guys haven't seen some of those, what I want you to do is take a look at this right here. This should look very familiar. This is your NASM OPT model. Stabilization, endurance, muscular development, max strength, and power. And at any given time, when a client first comes in with you, they may have a primary goal. Either a primary goal that they're coming to you for or that you're collaboratively setting with them based on where their fitness level is, based on what we're gonna find in our assessments and initial sessions. But the truth is, you're gonna be far better off if you start to think about these in pairs, right? And here's what I mean. At any given time, right, I'm gonna kind of tie these together. At any given time, someone may have a primary goal, but I'm gonna tell you not every exercise you do in the workout probably should fit exactly those variables. And here's what I mean. Let's say, for example, I don't train a lot of max strength clients these days, but maybe you guys yourselves are in a max strength phase. You're trying to get stronger, right? You're trying to lift heavier for 3 to 5 reps. That might be your primary goal. But even if you look at very well-known maximal strength programs like Jim Wendler's 5-3-1, you may be doing maximal strength reps for your first or second exercise, and then guess what happens? As you move throughout your workout, you move into your accessory movements, which actually look a lot more like muscular development. You might be doing some exercises for 3 to 5 reps, and then your accessory work moves into this 8 to 12 rep range. All right, so that might resonate for some of you guys. And I say the same thing, even as we find out, and we're gonna take a look at the opposite side of the board to give you guys some more ideas on how to know where to put someone. But let's say primarily, you're like, you know what, I think primarily they fit inside of stabilization. They don't move really well right now. They might have some body composition goals, but we still kind of need to lay the foundation before we progress and we really start to add loads. That's great. But again, you might find maybe 3 to 5 of your movements in that workout are gonna be stabilization tempo, stabilization focus. And then you might find some of their other exercises might look a little bit more like muscular endurance. So I'm just here to tell you guys that is okay. That is how I train clients, and I would promise you most people who understand the OPT model and are actually using it are probably training clients that way too. So you've got my permission to blend these together a little bit. It's not hard and fast black and white. And now here's what I want to do. I want to try to take your knowledge of the OPT model, your knowledge of the assessments, and put them to language that you might better understand or relate to. So let's just assume that you're doing some formal assessments. Let's assume that you're going to do overhead squat, single leg squat, whatever it is you might use, whether it's in the first session or not for this video. But you probably should also, whether it's in that first session or that first week, you should probably also just have your clients do a couple versions of the primary movement patterns. You probably want to see them push, you want to see them pull, you want to see them hinge, squat, lunge, because those are the exercises you're going to be doing, right? And what has always been helpful for me, especially with understanding maybe what phase they should focus in, is actually giving them somewhat of a grade. And this isn't like a total score someone's getting, but it's more so for you guys to know, hey, based on what I'm seeing, not just in my first session, but maybe even like my first week, I'm gonna have a better idea of what the primary focus for them should be. So there's 2 ways you could look at this, either a scale of 1, 2, 3, or personally what I like more is the stoplight. Mostly because I actually think this is fun to explain to clients too, when I'm looking at things and what I'm seeing, is essentially giving them, for these exercises, as you have them do some sort of push. Maybe it's a push-up, maybe it's the push assessment, maybe it's an overhead press with a light weight, like you've got some options. You essentially give them a grade, right? Red would be like, okay, I don't feel comfortable loading this movement right now. Like there's a lot of things we need to improve, and the overhead press is a great example. Let's say you have someone do a very light overhead press motion and they can't even lock the arm out overhead, right? Or they're like way out in front of the body. That would be an indication for me, like, okay, maybe overhead pushing, I'm gonna call that a red light exercise right now. It's not gonna be one that we're really gonna load, and that's probably an indication for me, like, all right, I'm thinking stabilization. I wanna improve the way they move. Yellow would be, all right, you know what? It looks pretty good. I mean, there's some room for improvement, but for example, let's say you have someone do a body weight squat, and for the most part, they don't get a ton of depth. Maybe they're not going butt to the ground, but you don't see the knees caving in, you don't see the feet turning out. Like, it looks pretty good, but they're just not getting as much depth as you would like. To me, that would be kind of like a yellow. It's like, all right, well, we've got some room for improvement there, but I'm not gonna be scared to do the exercise, right? We can train that. Green light would be like it sounds, right? You're in a car, hit the gas pedal, baby. All right, that means those are the exercises that when you see them do the exercise, you're like, that looks good. Like, I don't have any corrections. You look pretty strong and stable there. Those are gonna be the exercises that I'm like, all right, cool. Now we can focus on training those. So I really like the idea of using this and kind of assigning that to the exercises that you find, all right? And again, this is why it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, because there's not an exact formula, guys. You're gonna have to make the read here. If I have someone go through and do like some of my primary moves and I'm seeing mostly reds and yellows, what phase do you think you should start in? Probably one of those first two, right? Because it's a clear indication that they don't move really well. And if you start adding intensity, adding load within muscular development, strength, these higher phases, things might break down. But if I'm seeing, for the most part, I see no reds, like there's no exercise I have them do where I'm like, oh gosh, I can't watch you do that, right? Maybe a couple yellows and some greens, I'm gonna say, all right, like they're moving pretty well. Like, all right, there may be some room for improvement. I still have some elements of stabilization, but I might be starting them a little bit more in the muscular endurance, maybe even hypertrophy, all right? And then the very rare occurrence, very rare, right? I can't even think of a time that I've had it, where you get all greens. Well, then guess what? That might be someone who's already training significantly. They're training quite a bit. Maybe they've had a great coach in the past, good technique. And then from there, I would just start them in the phase that corresponds with their goals, right? So if they're a body composition client, I'm probably just gonna start them in muscular development, right? This muscular development, muscular endurance. But just a way of looking at it, right? Trying to take what you guys have learned with these phases, like what we're trying to focus on, relate that to what you're seeing, right? Especially keep in mind, not just first session, but first week, because you're feeling things out, you're trying some things. That's gonna give you a pretty good indication on like, all right, am I seeing a lot of red? Am I seeing mostly yellow? Am I seeing a mixture of yellow and green? And I think that will help you guys identify what their primary phase should be, right? I say primary. Even if I see reds and yellows, there's probably gonna still be some exercises I might do muscular endurance. For example, like a bicep curl, right? There's not a lot of technique most times that needs to go into it. It's a simpler one to train with those general variables, right? So I hope this helps you guys. Mostly our goal here at the Academy is not to lock you in, right? Not to trap you inside of the material. Make sure you learn it, but also like show you that there's a lot of room for opportunity and there's more flexibility than you might think as you're getting started. I think as long as you have some frameworks that you're following, and that's where I think even that red light, yellow light, green light can be really helpful just to understand where you might categorize them. It's gonna make sure that you feel really confident about the training that you're putting clients into. And if you guys have more questions on this stuff, leave them here in the comments. I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we read this stuff, and if we get enough comments, especially from people who'd like to see maybe like a webinar or a workshop on some of this stuff, then we'll put it together for you guys. So I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys on the other side.